Hello, Tom Maguire. I'm sorry I've got a bit of a cold, so I'm sounding a bit ridiculous, pretty blocked up at the minute. But I really wanted to get this review done because I've been really quite excited about reading this book. It's Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. Apparently it's his eighth novel, eighth or ninth, I think. I've only read three of his, including this one, but one of my very favourite books of all time is The Remains of the Day, which he wrote in 1986, I think, somewhere around then. And he won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2017 for that book. You can check it out on YouTube. He did a speech which is there on YouTube. There's quite a few interviews as well with him talking about Klara and the Sun. If you want to look at those, they're very interesting. I'll sort of talk about those in a little while as well. But yeah, I'm just going to do this review. I'm going to talk about how it's kind of relevant to personal development because that's what this channel is about. But I'm also going to give my opinion on it, my honest opinion, which I always do. There are things that I absolutely love about this book. I think it's a really good book, and if you don't want to listen to any more of this review, I would urge you to go out and buy it and read it or listen to it. It's on audio on Audible as well. But yeah, I'm also going to give you my reasons for the things I wasn't quite so keen on as well. So if you're interested in that, then hang around. So I've said before when I'm talking about personal development, although this channel is about personal development, I read as many personal development books and other books as possible to try and improve myself, but also to try and give you the very best from the world of personal development as well. I've said before, and I'll say it again, I think it's really important that we read fiction as well. I think if you just stick to personal development, self-help type books, non-fiction, although there's some fantastic stuff out there, that's very narrow to do that. There are so many fantastic books out there, so many brilliant fiction books. And actually, it was someone who said that when you read a good fiction, it changes you somehow. And it really does. And I've noticed that with just about every good fiction book I've read, that it kind of leaves you slightly changed. Usually, hopefully for the better, just slightly kind of wiser or of a slightly different perspective on things. And I just think it's really important as well from a personal development point of view to have that balance, to be able to do something that can kind of get you to escape a little bit, use your imagination, your creativity. Imagination and creativity are some of the most important things, aren't they, when it comes to being truly successful in life, whether you want to be successful in business, financially, or just successful in a kind of contented way, which for me is kind of like the most sensible way to be successful. You need to have imagination and creativity. You need to be able to kind of appreciate the small things in life. You need to be able to go outside and enjoy the environment that you're in and kind of use your imagination and kind of get excited about things and be curious. So some of the criticism that I've read pointed at this book has been, I saw one article saying that Never Let Me Go made the person kind of quite sad, really it sort of impacted them emotionally, and that this one doesn't, and sort of said that this book is a bit too cool and cold. And on one level, I kind of understand where they're coming from, but I don't really agree with that. I think it depends on your perspective. So Klara is an artificial friend, so she's an AI robot, and it's obviously set at some point in the future where basically artificial friends are there to keep teenagers from getting lonely. And you can quite well imagine a world where that kind of happens. Loneliness is something that's kind of on the rise massively. It's a real problem at the minute, and I think it's only likely to get worse. In some ways, as we know, we're more connected than ever, but in other ways, we're kind of further apart than we ever could be, particularly now with coronavirus and the lockdown, and the potential for that happening again as well in the not too distant future. But obviously AI is on the rise as well, and technology marches forward as quickly as it does. It's kind of crazy. I'm actually in the middle of getting a new laptop and Flight Simulator 2020 because I absolutely love flying. I've told you before, I fly light aircraft, but I also quite like, I'm not a gamer. I haven't got time for gaming. I'm genuinely not, but I do enjoy seeing what computers can do, and the latest Flight Simulator is amazing. Flight Simulator is amazing. You can literally go anywhere in the world and the graphics are absolutely fantastic. And I just kind of think it gives a bit of a scary picture of how things are going to be. I think it's not going to be very long before so many things can kind of be simulated, and we're going to be able to immerse ourselves in things in a way that is kind of, I don't know, gives us no chance to sort of turn back, really. And so Kazuo Ishiguro addresses some of these really interesting issues. He addresses issues similarly in some of his other books as well. And I did see parallels with my favourite book, The Remains of the Day, although it's very, very different to that. The Remains of the Day is, to me, is kind of like, it's a very cosy English sat out in a beautiful garden in the summer sunshine, sipping a lovely, perfectly made cup of tea or a cold glass of wine, with surrounded by rose bushes, an idyllic kind of thing. Although it has an edge, it does have its kind of dark side, but I won't go into the remains of the day here because I want to talk about Klara and the Sun. But there are similarities, and some of the questions that he addresses, I think, are really interesting. And I think for me, Klara and the Sun, I would kind of summarize really as a book that's quite simple to get through. There wasn't a kind of, my only downside really, my only criticism really would be I wasn't that keen on the world that it was set in. It didn't kind of give me the sort of imagery that I like getting from or I've enjoyed getting from the other books from Kazuo Ishiguro, particularly The Remains of the Day. The imagery in that is absolutely fantastic for me. I just find it a real kind of feast of lovely imagery, whereas I didn't really get that so much in Klara and the Sun. But I did feel emotional reading it. I was kind of disappointed in one respect because I was expecting a bit of a twist. You always expect the AI robot to turn bad, but that would have been far too predictable, and actually it ends up being quite a positive book, which I think makes a pleasant change, and I like that, and it leaves it a bit more subtle, and when it finishes it kind of leaves you not necessarily wanting more, because that sounds a bit Hollywood, like it's a film and there's going to be a sequel, and it isn't, and there isn't going to be, I'm sure. But it just kind of made me think, and I really like that from a book. It just made me wonder. And I've subsequently looked at some of his interviews, and he talks about how he sees the potential of AI. He talks about genetic editing and how that could be potentially really, really good for some of the things that we're faced with, some of the threats from disease, horrible diseases and things that could positively change. But also how it could be really scary in the sense that we could start to develop superior beings, and kind of, obviously genetic editing kind of speaks for itself, changing people's genes so that they can be maybe more intellectual or physically superior. And actually, how are we going to not do that? How do we kind of use it for good and not allow it to be used for those kind of things? And if we do use it for those kind of things, where does that leave us? He talks about the question of whether we have a soul or not, and how in the past, when we were much more led by religion, having a soul was something that was really kind of important, and we're kind of coming away from that a little bit. And the way this book is set is kind of, one of the things they say in the book is that the daughter, and this is a little bit of a spoiler just in case you don't want any kind of spoilers whatsoever, the daughter is ill and likely to die, and so the artificial friend Klara, who is her artificial friend, is able potentially to become just the same as the daughter. And they're asking her if she's able to do that. Is she able to take on the mannerisms, take on everything that she does, and actually become her, to replace her? And the father sort of says at one point to the mother that, we're stuck in our ways, we're older people, and we're sort of still stuck in these ways of thinking that people are unique, and we know now that they're not, and blah blah blah. And that really kind of struck me. I just thought, Jesus, imagine it. We do tend to think that, don't we? We tend to think we have souls and that we're individual. But the more you think about these things, the more kind of consumed you get with how vast time and space is, how long we've been here for, how long we're not going to be here for after we've died, how insignificant we are, blah, blah, blah. You do start to think about these bigger questions, and it can be quite frightening. So I found that really quite sad in a way, the idea that we might just be kind of replaceable. I don't personally think we are. I have my other sort of beliefs and opinions on that, but it's a very interesting thing to explore, I think. But yeah, it's just a really nice book. It's quite simple, I think. It's quite straightforward. It's relatively easy to get through. I love the artwork on the cover. I love his titles. I think most of Ishiguro's titles for his books are fantastic. I'm hoping to read I think it's called The Buried Giant fairly soon. I've read Never Let Me Go, this one, and The Remains of the Day. So they're the only ones I've read so far. I've got The Unconsoled on my shelf, which I would like to read at some point. I've been meaning to read it for ages, but there are so many books, aren't there, that I just get distracted. I'll buy one day, and then I'm about to read it, and something else will come along, and I'm just in the mood for that one slightly more, and then you forget. But anyway, it's such a good book. At one point, in one of his interviews, he does say it's kind of a companion book to Never Let It Go, and kind of a bit of a sequel to an extent, sort of ish, and lots of other people have been saying that. Something he says in one of his interviews, which I found quite interesting, is that he was talking about when he moved with his wife into one of his homes, and he had a study, and he was really happy to have this study where he could just leave it as much of a mess as he wanted to. And he says that his own, when he's in there, it's like he's on a different planet kind of thing, and you hear different writers talking that way, and I find that quite interesting. He says that his own sense of success and failure exists in his own head. So it's a fantastic book. I really recommend this one. Lots of people have been looking forward to this. Kazuo Ishiguro, he's got a huge following. He's very, very good. It's interesting because he describes himself. He says he's not a prolific writer. He says he actually struggles with writing. He's only done, well, he started writing in the 80s, and he's only done eight or nine, and forgive me about not being completely spot on about 8 or 9 novels in that time. So he's relatively quite slow with his writing, but the ones he does do are fantastic. I just found that quite interesting because I recently finished one of Stephen King's book as well, who's on the other side of that, who just literally just keeps churning book out after book. Very, very different. They're not really, I don't want to say you can't compare them, because of course you can. They're both very talented writers, and they have a very different style, but they're both very successful. They're both very, very talented. So I can't help but, because I've read them both recently, I can't help but kind of compare them from a personal development kind of success point of view, I suppose. And so you've got Stephen King on one hand, who just keeps them coming. Sometimes some of them are a bit rubbish, but he keeps them coming and he gets quite a lot of hits, the majority of hits, whereas Kazuo Ishiguro's only done sort of 8 or 9, but every one of them really has been very good. It's just an interesting comparison. I thought I'd throw it in there. Please keep liking, subscribing. Really appreciate it, and look forward to doing the next review very soon. Cheers.